So for those of you that don't know, Gemma, can you tell me a bit about your story and really where your resilience comes from?
So at the age of 10 years old, my life drastically changed, and it felt like it changed overnight. I developed an eating disorder, and I didn't understand what was happening to me back then, but my parents and I were fiercely close, and they broached the subject that they felt like I might be developing anorexia. And in hindsight, that anorexia stemmed from a place of uncertainty, not feeling in control, and feeling hurt by people's words and actions because I was getting bullied at school. And my parents took me to the doctor, and I was turned away saying that I wasn't low enough in weight to have a problem. Unfortunately, those words impacted my life for the next 13 years. And within a year of that doctor's appointment, I was admitted to a children's adolescent psychiatric unit and told if I didn't eat or drink within 24 hours, I'd be dead. So as you can imagine, what I went through for those 13 years, even though we went to hell and back as a family, obviously myself, but the bigger picture is it affects loved ones in a way that people can't even begin to understand unless they've been in those shoes. But we've been through some and fortunately we've all come out the other side, and I've come out the other side. And I think my whole story and journey is one that I've used and managed to use it for good. It's made me realise that I am stronger than I ever know. It's made me understand techniques around resilience. It's made me very, very self-aware of who I am as a person, but also very, very educated in what I need and when I need it. And I think you can't implement resilience unless you know the foundations of where you've been, where you are, and where you want to go, because resilience comes from life experience, and it comes from learning, and it comes from the bad times, and it comes from the good times. So I think that's initially where I get my resilience from, and I've lived my life by it'll be okay in the end, and if it's not okay, it's not the end.
And then, I mean, in particular, this year obviously has been difficult for everybody. But what I'd love to know is what positive outcomes has this year given you?
You know what? I mean, all of us, everyone says, if you'd have said this time last year where we'd be right now, this time last year I was on tour, you know, I was on a UK #1 tour with like actors that I'd watched growing up, Bob Dawes, Mark Curry, Debbie Grant. I hope they don't feel offended by that because they'll think that I'm saying that they're old. But, you know, just living the dream. And then here we are, it's nearly Christmas and there's no panto, there's no theatre. Everything in my industry as an actress, aside from public speaking, but even the public speaking stuff that, you know, I was so looking forward to going into schools, going into companies, it's all stopped. Everything's online, but sadly, theatre's not online as yet in terms of being able to perform still. So it's been a massive, massive shock to the system, but again, it has for everybody. But what I have learned is I'm okay just being me. As an actor, it's very easy to sort of put on different hats. And I love doing it, don't get me wrong. And I never cheat myself. I always use what's in here when I'm acting so that I can relate to a different character or relate to a different situation that I might not have been in. But essentially, being on tour, I'd not been on my own for 7 months. I'd not been at home. I'd not been in this room. You know, I'd been living out of suitcases. So actually, I really used that time to just, for the first time, find my feet, breathe, and do things that I'd not had time to do. And we talk about this a lot, Claire, about the power of time as well. You know, we've been given a bit of a gift. And even though it's been hard and, you know, there's been some weeks and months where I've thought, how on earth am I going to feed Ruby, my dog, let alone me? But I kind of embraced the time out with her as well, going to the park, taking her out for a run, watching her, the way she adapts to new surroundings and new situations and just lives in the moment. And I think that's what I've learned to do. I've learned to be a little bit easier and trust the process and not always be forward thinking. I've always used my initiative and I've always tried to think outside the box, because as we said earlier, you know, my life's been based around fight or flight and survival. But actually, I've done the back work, and I realised that this year. I've done all of the graft, and now I've just got to trust the process. And who'd have thought that this year would be the year that I'd become manager of Seed, you know, the charity that my parents set up because I nearly died 4 times. Like, that's nuts. Like, that's the magnitude of what this year has brought to me. It's given me time to be, feel, see, suss it, and it's brought me to a place that I never, ever, ever believed or dreamed I would be in. So yeah, there's been a hell of a lot this year that I've learned, but I think the sole thing is figuring out me.
And so hearing how you've embraced that positivity, have you been able to channel that to create impact, in particular for young people?
Massively. This whole journey, and you'll remember, Claire, when I was on tour and we were trying to figure out schedules of where I was going on tour so I could go and speak to the kids in schools in the areas that I was touring, which was fantastic. But we did that. We started that journey, you know, two years ago. And the one thing that I kept hold of during lockdown was how passionate I am about speaking to the kids and our relationship with Rachel at Pixel and all of the wonderful work that they do. And one of the big things that actually Rachel and others and yourself might say that I inspired those kids during lockdown, but they inspired me. You know, doing that Be Awesome Go Big campaign with the transition of year 6 to year 7 for the kids. And then not just that, but getting the feedback. I get emotional thinking about it. What more can you, like, that they impacted me so much. So yeah, working with kids, albeit virtually and online during lockdown, has been like my number one top priority. And not just about the eating disorders and the charity, but just about everything that I've learned and to keep them going. And then carrying on from that with, you know, with Seed and our educational toolkit, you know, which I talk about often with the teachers that I sort of get to work with, and all of the different wonderful people who are trying to really, really, really protect our kids right now, because lockdown has had a massive, massive impact on them. Their whole world and lifestyle has been changed. You know, kids need, as much as they don't like to admit it, rules are important, stability is important, and routine and structure. It is for all of us, but I'm 36, so I've kind of figured that bit out now. If you'd have put me in that situation at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you know, I would have spiraled even more than I already did back then without the pressure of the way the world is at the moment. So for me, making sure that I've kept those relationships strong, making sure that, you know, I adapt and change our services at Seed, I adapt and change my criteria as a public speaker, making sure I learn and educate myself as Gemma. You know, that has been one of the biggest things that I've prided myself on through lockdown, but also the kids have given me back so much more than they realise.
And so what's the power of sharing your story? What do you feel is the impact it has on others?
I'm in a very, very lucky position that some people might have seen me off the telly. So with being off the telly, you get a little blue tick on Twitter and a blue tick on Instagram. And basically you get a platform, and you get that platform not just to be in the paper or to go on a red carpet. For me, that platform is my responsibility to use in a way to empower and help others. So the power of sharing my story is that they see this person that they think's out of reach and untouchable, and they realize that, hey, I messed up so many times. I share my stories and they make people laugh because some of them are hilarious, especially the one where I got demoted from Cinderella in pantomime to the back end of a donkey. But I also share my stories in terms of going, I remember that day I had a heart attack, you know, and they suddenly see the barriers being broken down. And I think that's the gift that I've been given, that I've been there, I've lived it, I've experienced it, but I've also am there experiencing and living my dreams, which the two are so far apart. I think the power and the impact I like to think I give is that they see that nobody's perfect and that we're all in it together. And I think, especially during lockdown, the playing field has been leveled beyond anybody's imagination. And I think that's a really, really good thing.
Yeah. And finally, if you had one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think I've said one of my favourites already, so I won't say that. That was, it'll be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end. But my big one, and it's not my advice, it's Dr. Seuss. And you might have heard me say this many a time, Claire, but it never gets old. And I just live by it. And it's, today you are you. That is truer than true. There is no one alive that is youer than you.